You know, there is something just deeply satisfying about building a miniature world.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you set up a terrarium or an aquarium, and you arrange the stones just right, you balance the water chemistry, you pick out the perfect little aquatic plants.
Yeah, it gives you this illusion of total control.
Exactly. In that moment, you've created this perfect, static little snow globe, and nothing goes wrong, right? Because you are the one playing architect with the environment.
Right. It's the ultimate appeal of a closed ecosystem. I mean, we really lean into the idea that if we just follow the instructions and keep everything within the right parameters, we can freeze this perfect biological moment right behind a pane of glass.
But then you step away from the glass box and, you look at the actual world outside, and nature really doesn't care about our need for predictability.
Not even a little bit.
And no. So the environment outside the box decides to throw a massive curveball, and suddenly that perfect little snow globe is just thrown into absolute chaos.
Which is such a fascinating dynamic.
It really is. And that tension, the tension between the little worlds we try to control and the big world that actually controls us, that's the focus of our exploration today. We are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating single source today.
You have the blog post, right?
Yep, a blog post dated August 9th, 2026. It's from a hobbyist fish keeper named Ang, and the post is titled Notes on Fishkeeping Part 312, Surviving the Heat Wave.
And, while that title might sound like just a mundane maintenance log, Aang has actually inadvertently documented this really high-stakes, real-time ecological drama.
Totally. So our mission today is to put this specific micro-ecosystem under the microscope. We are going to explore how a sudden, violent weather shift outside a house triggers an unexpected, massive chain reaction inside an aquarium.
Right, and specifically, we're focusing on the surprising double-edged nature of a very common aquatic plant.
Duckweed.
Exactly, duckweed, and how its reaction to the weather just completely redefines the ecosystem it lives in.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand the chaos inside the tank, we have to establish the environmental whiplash happening outside of it.
Yeah, the weather's the trigger here.
Right. And Aang paints a very vivid picture of the local weather. So the area experienced 2 solid weeks of continuous nonstop rain.
Just absolute monsoons. The ground is utterly saturated.
Yeah, and then abruptly that weather breaks and they are slammed with a severe heat wave. It's
Yeah.
a drastic atmospheric pivot.
It's the kind of weather shift that just gives you a headache.
Oh, for sure. And Aang notes that this heat wave isn't like a dry heat. It's accompanied by this intense high humidity that is especially palpable at night.
So the air is just thick, heavy, and stagnant.
Exactly. I mean, think about the feeling of stepping out of a blisteringly hot shower into a tiny, unventilated bathroom.
Oh, that is the worst feeling.
Right. When you try to dry off, you literally can't. The moisture in the air is just oppressive. It clings to you. But here's where I get stuck on Aang's observation.
Okay, what is it?
So even though the air feels completely saturated with water, Aang notices that the water in their indoor aquarium tanks, and their outdoor ponds too, is evaporating at a really rapid pace.
Yeah, the water is just vanishing.
Right, but if the air is already holding so much moisture, where is the tank water going? I mean, how is it evaporating?
What's fascinating here is that it feels like a paradox, but it really just comes down to the physical mechanics of thermal energy.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So when a heat wave hits, the ambient temperature of the room rises, right?
Right?
And the water in those small tanks absorbs that heat.
Because there's not enough volume to insulate it.
Exactly. And as the water temperature increases, the water molecules gain kinetic energy. They start moving faster, vibrating more intensely.
And then they just sort of launch themselves out.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually, the molecules at the surface gain enough energy to break the hydrogen bonds that are holding them in a liquid state, and they escape into the air as a gas.
Even if the air is already incredibly humid, like oppressive shower room humid.
Yes, because warmer air actually has a much higher capacity to hold water vapor than cooler air does.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So even though it feels completely saturated to a human, that superheated air can still accept a lot more moisture. Plus, you have to remember the mechanics of the tank itself.
You mean like the filters?
Right. An aquarium usually has filters or air stones that are constantly agitating the surface of the water. That artificially increases the surface area and actually drives even more evaporation.
Man, so for Aang, this creates a sudden, massive maintenance burden.
Oh, a huge one. Because an aquarium is a tiny, vulnerable body of water.
Right, unlike a natural lake, which has, the mass and the earth around it to act as a thermal regulator, a glass box has absolutely no buffer.
None. And Ang casually mentions that alongside dealing with these evaporating aquatic tanks, they certainly have to drastically increase the frequency of watering their terrestrial plants too.
Right. So the human managing the ecosystem is suddenly thrust from being this passive observer into an active emergency responder.
Yeah, they have to be. Because if they don't intervene, this rapid evaporation is going to concentrate waste products in the remaining water and literally leave aquatic life stranded.
And that stranding is the first visible domino to fall in the tank, because as the water evaporates, it drops the water line significantly, which brings us to the main character of our deep dive, the duckweed.
Yes, the duckweed.
For those who might not be familiar, duckweed is this tiny, bright green aquatic plant. It doesn't root in the gravel at the bottom, it just floats freely on the very surface of the water.
It's super common in the hobby.
Yeah, but because the water levels in Aang's tanks are dropping so rapidly, the duckweed is getting left behind.
Right, it gets pulled by surface tension toward the edges.
Exactly. And as the water drops, the plants get plastered against the dry aquarium glass. It creates this literal bathtub ring of stuck green plants all around the top of the tank.
Just clinging for dear life.
Yeah. And Aang points out the immediate necessity of topping up the lost water just to keep the duckweed afloat. But I have to ask, is this just an aesthetic issue for the fish keeper?
Like, does it just look bad?
Yeah, like, oh no, my tank has an ugly ring of dried green mush on the glass. Or does the duckweed physically being stuck to the glass represent an actual breakdown of the tank's mechanics?
Oh, it is a complete mechanical failure of the plant.
Wait, really?
Absolutely. To understand why, you have to look at how duckweed is biologically engineered.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, unlike terrestrial plants, duckweed doesn't have true stems or deep root systems. It basically consists of a tiny green body called a frond, and usually just a single hair-like root hanging down.
That's it, just one little root.
Pretty much. And it relies entirely on the water's surface tension to survive. The top of the frond is covered in stomata, which are these microscopic pores that take in carbon dioxide from the air and release oxygen.
Okay, so it breathes from the top.
Right. Meanwhile, that little root dangling below is actively pulling dissolved nutrients directly out of the water column.
I see. So when it gets stuck to the side of the glass?
The entire biological machine just grinds to a halt. The root is no longer suspended in the nutrient-rich water, so the plant immediately begins to starve.
Oh, wow.
And simultaneously, without the constant contact with the water to keep its tissues hydrated, the intense heat of the room will cause the frond to desiccate and die within hours.
Ah, so when Aang rushes to pour fresh water into the tank to lift that duckweed off the glass, they aren't just cleaning up a bathtub ring.
Not at all. They're performing a vital mechanical reset, reintegrating a crucial biological component back into the active environment.
Okay, so Aang does the grueling work. They bring in fresh water, they top off all the tanks, and the duckweed lifts off the glass. It's floating freely, its roots are back in the water, crisis averted.
Well, partially averted.
Right, because the heat wave is still raging outside. The ambient temperature of the room remains really high, which means the water inside the glass box is now noticeably warmer than its usual baseline.
And this is where the story shifts, because this warmer water completely rewrites the duckweed's biological behavior.
Here's where it gets really interesting. While Aang is in the middle of drafting this very blog post, they document this real-time shift.
Yeah, the duckweed doesn't just survive the heat wave, it actually uses it. It begins to multiply at a significantly accelerated rate.
It's like a sci-fi movie trope, you know, where an organism goes into hyperdrive simply because the thermostat got turned up.
It really is.
This hypergrowth results in a noticeably thicker surface layer of the plant on top of the water. But why? What is it about the heat that causes a simple floating plant to suddenly go into hyperdrive?
Well, temperature basically acts as the master dial for a plant's metabolic engine.
Okay, so warmer equals faster.
Exactly. At a cellular level, plant growth is driven by enzymes facilitating chemical reactions, things like photosynthesis, nutrient processing, cellular division.
Right, the basic building blocks of growth.
Yeah. And in cooler water, those molecules move sluggishly, and the enzymes process reactions at a slow, steady, manageable pace. But when the heat wave warms the water, you are essentially adding thermal fuel to that cellular factory.
Ah, so the kinetic energy goes up again, just like with evaporation.
Precisely. The molecules collide faster, the enzymes work faster, and the plant processes nutrients and light at a dramatically increased rate.
So it just goes crazy.
Pretty much. Up to a certain point, like before it gets so hot that the enzymes actually break down warmer water, triggers exponential replication. One frond splits into two, two into four, four into eight, and they're doing this in a fraction of their normal cycle time.
But this poses a deeply problematic question for someone maintaining a closed system. Because, when a plant starts thriving too much in a closed box, at what point does a boom become a burden?
And that is the exact tipping point Eng hits.
Right, because the duckweed was in balance before. But now, propelled by the heat, it's vastly outcompeting its environment.
Setting the stage for a major ecological imbalance.
Exactly. This massive biological boom leads to the dark side of this new hyper-thick canopy of duckweed. Because this accelerated growth creates severe, immediate consequences for absolutely everything living beneath the surface.
Yeah, it gets pretty grim down there.
So what does this all mean? Well, Eng notes two specific life-threatening detriments to the tank. First, the incredibly thick layer acts as a physical barrier that restricts oxygen exchange at the water's surface.
Which is a huge problem.
And second, the dense green mat completely blocks sunlight from reaching the bottom of the aquarium.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, those two factors are the exact recipe for a systemic collapse.
Okay, let's look at the mechanics of why that canopy is so destructive.
Right. So in any aquatic environment, but especially in a small glass box, the surface of the water is the most vital organ of the entire system. It essentially acts as the lungs of the tank.
Wait, how so? I mean, the fish aren't breathing the air directly?
No, but the water itself needs to breathe through gas exchange.
Okay, I'm following.
So carbon dioxide, which is constantly being produced by the fish breathing and, organic matter breaking down, needs to diffuse out of the water and into the air. And conversely, fresh oxygen from the room needs to dissolve into the water so the fish and the beneficial bacteria can survive. This exchange happens right at the boundary layer where air meets water.
So for this to work efficiently,
You need maximum surface area and ideally a little bit of surface agitation like ripples or currents from the filter to constantly turn the water over and expose new molecules to the air.
okay. So when you have a hyperdense mat of duckweed covering literally every square inch of the surface.
You've essentially thrown a thick, heavy, wet wool blanket over the lungs of the tank.
What a visual. A wet wool blanket.
Yeah, it forms this impenetrable physical baffle. It stops the surface agitation dead, and it vastly reduces the surface area of water actually touching the air.
Meaning the oxygen in the water gets rapidly depleted by the inhabitants below, but it cannot be replenished.
Exactly. They're basically suffocating.
And to compound the issue, all the lights go out.
Right. The second problem.
By blocking the ambient sunlight from the room, any other submerged aquatic plants rooted at the bottom of the tank are thrust into total darkness.
So they can no longer photosynthesize.
Right. So not only are they not producing oxygen to help the struggling fish, but they will eventually begin to rot.
Which creates even more waste and consumes even more of the remaining oxygen.
It's this incredibly cruel irony here. The duckweed is up on the surface having the absolute time of its life, thriving, multiplying, basking in the heat and the light while it is actively suffocating and shading out the rest of the ecosystem beneath it.
It's a complete monopoly on resources.
It really sounds like an absolute disaster. Like, it sounds like Aang needs to immediately grab a net and rip all that duckweed out of the tank before everything just dies.
And, that would be the logical reaction if we were only looking at half the picture.
Wait, really? Because I'm genuinely stuck here. If this thick green blanket is restricting oxygen and blocking all the light, how does Aang's post suddenly pivot to calling this plant a lifesaver?
It's a great question.
Doesn't the suffocation completely cancel out any possible benefit?
It is the ultimate double-edged sword of ecology. And to understand why the duckweed is simultaneously saving the tank, we have to look at the invisible chemical warfare happening in the water.
Chemical warfare?
Yeah, specifically the nitrogen cycle.
Okay, walk me through that. Because I know it's a big deal in fish keeping.
It's everything. So, in a closed aquarium, fish consume food and produce waste, primarily in the form of ammonia.
And ammonia is highly toxic.
Extremely. Fortunately, there are beneficial bacteria in the tank that consume that ammonia and convert it into nitrites, and then another set of bacteria converts those nitrites into nitrates.
Okay, ammonia to nitrates, then to nitrates.
Exactly. Now, nitrates are far less toxic to fish, but they are still a waste product. And in the glass box, they have nowhere to go. They just steadily build up over time.
Which is why you have to do water changes.
Right. Usually, the human Aang has to manually intervene by physically removing the nitrate-heavy water and replacing it with clean water.
But during a heat wave, The fish's metabolism is also running higher, right? So they are likely producing way more waste, driving those nitrate levels up even faster.
Exactly. But here is the brilliant evolutionary trick of duckweed. To a fast-growing aquatic plant, nitrates aren't toxic waste at all.
What are they?
They are an all-you-can-eat buffet of premium fertilizer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because the heat wave kicked the duckweed's metabolic engine into hyperdrive, its appetite for fertilizer also went completely through the roof.
So that massive, suffocating green blanket is actually a hyper-efficient biological filtration system.
Yes. Millions of tiny roots are dangling into the water,
Yeah.
aggressively sucking up the toxic nitrates faster than they can even accumulate. It effectively acts as a massive nutrient sponge, purifying the water column.
That is amazing. So it's filtering the chemical waste. But wait, what about the second benefit Aang notes?
The algae.
Yeah. Aang mentions that the thick duckweed canopy directly reduces algae blooms. And algae is usually like the absolute bane of a fish keeper's existence, especially in the summer. But how does the duckweed stop it?
By utilizing the very mechanism that makes it dangerous in the first place. Competitive exclusion.
Okay, explain that.
So algae is a very simple organism that requires two main ingredients to trigger a massive, uncontrollable bloom. Excess nutrients in the water and intense light.
And a heat wave combined with rising nitrates in a small tank sounds like the perfect recipe for an algae explosion.
It would normally turn the tank into a toxic green soup. But the duckweed outsmarts it on both fronts.
Wait, so the exact same mechanism that is bad blocking the sunlight is also the exact mechanism that is good because it starves out the algae blooms.
That's the beautiful contradictory balance of it. The duckweed aggressively monopolizes the surface, acting as a natural shade cloth that steals all the light, so the algae has no energy to photosynthesize.
And simultaneously.
Because the duckweed is absorbing all the nitrates, the algae has absolutely no chemical fuel to grow. The exact same suffocating blanket that threatens to deplete the oxygen is actively shielding the tank from a catastrophic algae takeover.
It completely outcompetes the algae on every single level. That is just wild to think about happening in a little glass box in someone's living room.
It's a full-on war zone in there.
It really is. So just to synthesize this incredible chain of events Aang documented, it all starts with a sudden atmospheric shift. You have 2 weeks of continuous monsoons that break into a humid, stagnant heat wave.
Right.
And the thermal energy from that heat wave causes rapid water evaporation despite the intense humidity, dropping the water levels and stranding the duckweed against the dry glass, threatening it with desiccation.
Which forces the ecosystem manager to step in, manually topping off the water to reset the biological mechanics of the floating plants.
But once the water is replenished, the warm temperatures fuel a massive metabolic explosion. The duckweed multiplies at an exponential rate, creating this dense surface canopy.
And that canopy creates a beautiful, terrifying paradox.
Exactly. It acts as a suffocating barrier that threatens to stop gas exchange and cool the plants below, while serving as a miraculous biological filter that absorbs toxic nitrates and entirely prevents toxic algae blooms.
It perfectly illustrates the concept of homeostasis, or, well, the lack thereof, in a closed ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because in a massive open system like a natural lake, there are countless checks and balances. Wind breaks the surface tension, rainfall dilutes the nitrates, and temperature fluctuations are absorbed by the sheer volume of water.
But in a closed artificial system, homeostasis doesn't exist naturally.
No, it is an illusion maintained entirely by human intervention.
And when we intervene, we aren't really controlling nature, are we? We are just managing the side effects of our intervention.
Exactly.
You know, this single short blog entry from August 2026 proves a really profound point for anyone listening. Managing complex information or managing a physical environment requires a deep level of nuance.
It demands that we abandon binary labels.
Right, like good or bad. A single element, like our friend the duckweed, can be both a poison and a cure, entirely depending on the environmental pressures acting upon it and the mechanics of the system as a whole.
It forces us to recognize that there is no such thing as an isolated event in an ecosystem. Every action, even just a spike in room temperature, has a cascading, multi-layered reaction.
We spend so much time enjoying the illusion of the perfect, static snow globe, but the reality is that ecosystems are dynamic, aggressively responsive, and incredibly sensitive to the macro environment around them.
Truly.
We just spent this entire deep dive looking at a tiny glass box on a hobbyist's desk. We saw how a simple, sudden spike in thermal energy could completely rewrite the biological rules of survival, of gas exchange, and of natural filtration in just a few gallons of water.
It's a lot of drama for a few gallons.
Yeah. Right? So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If a localized humid heat wave can cause that much mechanical chaos and complex biological adaptation in an aquarium, you can literally wrap your arms around. How deeply hidden and how unimaginably massive are the chain reactions happening right now in the lakes, rivers, and oceans we rely on every day when they are faced with these exact same weather whiplashes?
Yeah, when you scale up that fragility, it really shifts how you view the resilience of our natural world.
It absolutely does. The next time you look at a pond or an aquarium, you won't just see water and floating green leaves. You'll see the intricate, invisible biological engines and chemical cycles hard at work fighting for balance. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Aang's microecosystem. Catch you on the next one.